and complete the work that you have started, and lay me at his feet, just worshiping Jesus, bread of life so sweet. I don't want to move from this holy, holy place, for too many times I've resisted your grace. I don't want to move from your sweet embrace, or the nearness of your face. I don't want to move from this holy place. I don't want to move from this holy place.
You are my strength when I am weak. You are the treasure that I seek. You are my all in all. Seeking you as a precious jewel, Lord, to give up I'd be a fool. You are my all in all. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Taking my sin, my cross, my shame, rising again, I bless your name. You are my all in all. When I fall down, you pick me up. When I am dry, you fill my cup. You are my all in all. You are my strength when I am weak. You are the treasure that I seek. You are my all in all. Seeking you as a precious gem, Lord, to give up I'd be a fool. You are my all in all.
Taking my sin, my cross, my shame, rising again, I bless your name. You are my all in all. When I fall down, you pick me up. When I am dry, you fill my cup. You are my all in all. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Jesus, Lamb of God, worthy is your name. Worthy is your name. Worthy is your name. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. My help comes from the Lord. My help comes from the Lord. Maker of heaven and earth, a 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, but my help comes from the Lord. My help comes from the Lord. My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow my foot to be moved. He who keeps me will not slumber. For the Lord who made the heavens and earth will be my strength forever. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. My help comes from the Lord. My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth.
Who can satisfy my soul like you? Who on earth could comfort me and love me like you do? Who could ever be more faithful, true? I will trust in you. I will trust in you, my God. There is a fountain, who is a king, victorious warrior and Lord of everything. My rock, my shelter, my very own, blessed Redeemer, who reigns upon the throne. There is a fountain, who is a king, victorious warrior and Lord of everything. My rock, my shelter, my very own, blessed Redeemer, who reigns upon the throne. Who could ever be more faithful, true? Lord Jesus, Lord Jesus, none but you. There is a fountain, who is a king, victorious warrior and Lord of everything. My rock, my shelter,
We're going to go ahead and start. This morning, we're going to be covering the bulk of this class this morning is going to be on Nehemiah. And it's going to be a faith that acts. So I want to start this with a brief backstory, a brief explanation of the man who created the phrase, God is dead. I'm sure we've heard that many times. It was a philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche. He was raised in a Christian family, and this man, he did do very much for science as a whole, for that branch of science and philosophy, and he shaped a lot of the ways we think now about modern psychology. But he was one of the most influential atheists of our time, of the modern age. And he described Christianity as a victim faith, a faith that did not enable people to go after what they want, a faith that caused hesitation and inaction. So he used the contrast of Rome, the Roman Empire, before Christianity and after Christianity. And before, they were a polytheistic society. They had a god for about every physical thing you can imagine, wealth and war and anything you could think of, they had a god for it. And after Christianity, they embraced more of a meekness and passivity, he says, and this is what in part led to their cultural decline. This was his claim. Before, obviously, they were focused on conquering, on strength, on duty, and after Christianity, their pagan ethos was gone. So I think that it's easy for us as Christians to throw out the baby with the bathwater here, to really just disregard everything he says, that Christianity is not a victim faith, forget what this atheist says. But I don't think we need to take the insult with the criticism here. I think that he has a valid point in that sometimes people use their faith as an excuse for hesitation and inaction, to just say, I'm trusting God in this, or I'm giving it all to God, when in reality, God wants us to move, and he decides to help us in this. I think of the idea of the Israelites crossing the Jordan to enter the promised land of Canaan, and how God says the priests must step into the Jordan in order for me to enact this miracle. Their feet must go into the water. So God, in this example, he requires action in order for God to move through us. My contrast when I immediately hear Nietzsche's claim that Christianity is a victim of faith is Jesus. He says in Matthew 6, he says, lay up not for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consume, and where thieves do not break in nor steal. I don't think Jesus' claim contradicts with Nietzsche's. Neither of them are calling us to inaction. They are both calling us to act in active obedience. But Jesus calls us to action in relation to eternal things. So the signs of a victim faith, when I thought of this, what are the signs that I see in people hesitating or being inactive on the basis of their faith? I would say people say they're waiting on God at some times. And sometimes patience is very necessary for our faith. We're called to work on our patience. And this is a fruit of the Spirit. This is something that we ought to master and we ought to be good with. But sometimes I see this used in the wrong way. Waiting on God should be used in a faithful context, and it may not always be that way, at least in my anecdotal experience. Calling fear wisdom. So what I see here is hesitation can be misconstrued as wisdom, as inaction, as just waiting back and observing. It may be seen as a wise thing, but I believe that those two can cross over at some points. Also saying, if God wants it, it will happen. I've seen this many times in the avoidance of decision making. If God wants this, he'll just allow this to happen. And these are all claims before we get into the text, the main part of the lesson of Nehemiah. The last thing is trusting the process as a cover for not taking responsibility of things. So, a question, rhetorical, before we get in is, where have we seen fellow Christians, or where have we seen in ourselves, confuse trust with avoidance? So let's just think on that as we continue. So a danger of a passive faith is just as James says it. In James chapter 2, he says, even so, faith, if it have not works, is dead in itself. We know this. Faith without works is dead. It's empty. If faith doesn't move, it's not faith. Faith has to call us to action in order for it to be a genuine faith, and that's how we can see that it is a real faith in our lives. So let's turn to Nehemiah chapter 1. And Nehemiah is a beautiful example of faith shown through action. Nehemiah is all about concise action, doing what needs to be done, not hesitating. And Nehemiah is fast with his action. One of the most baffling things is, I'll give a brief backstory for Nehemiah, because before I heard a lesson given on this last year, I was like, who the heck is Nehemiah? He's just a guy that built a wall, right? That's all I knew. But Nehemiah is an incredible story. So in the time of Nehemiah, the Persians actually had Nehemiah in captivity. So Jerusalem is in rubble. The walls have been destroyed. There are people who have moved in from out of Jerusalem, just people who have intermingled with their people when they are commanded to remain Hebrew with Hebrew. It's a nation that's in disarray at the time. And Nehemiah, as we'll see, he is not in the land of Judah at this time. He is under King Artaxerxes. I'm saying that correctly. It's got some X's in there, so. Artaxerxes is the king of the Persian Empire at this time. And Nehemiah is serving under him, directly under him actually. So this shows before anything even takes place, Nehemiah is a foreigner under a Persian king, and he's very high up. I believe he's the cupbearer to the king. He has worked his way up foreseeably through competence, through being a good worker, and he has gained favor in the eyes of the king. So we'll start in chapter 1 of Nehemiah and verse 2, and I'm reading out of the American Standard Version. I'll read 2 through 11. All right, verse 2. That Hananiah, one of the brethren, came, he and certain men out of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, that were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in province are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. And it came to pass, when I heard these words, that I sat down and wept and mourned certain days, and I fasted and prayed before God of heaven. I like this. His initial response is to weep and pray and fast. This is obviously a time of extreme decisiveness. He's figuring out, what do I do? And he's mourning over his country at finding out what has happened to his homeland, that it's in disrepair at this point. So, verse 5, and said I, beseech thee, O Jehovah, the God of heaven, the great and terrible God, that keepeth covenant and loving kindness with them that love him and keep his commandments. Let thine ear now be attentive and thine eyes open, that thou mayest hearken unto the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now, day and night, for the children of Israel thy servants, while I confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against thee. Yea, and I, my father's house, have sinned. We have dealt very corruptly against thee, and have not kept the commandments, nor the statutes, nor the ordinances, which thou commandest thy servant Moses. Remember, I beseech thee, the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if you trespass, I will scatter you abroad among the people. So he's recognizing, we've messed up. Me and my ancestors, we have messed up, and we deserve what happened because we have broken the promises which have been told to thy ancestors. Verse 9, if ye return unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts were in uttermost parts of heaven, yet I will gather them from thence and bring them unto the place that I have chosen to cause my name to dwell there. Verse 10, now these are thy servants and thy people, whom thou hast redeemed by thy great power and by thy strong hand. O Lord, I beseech thee now, let thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant and to the prayer of thy servants, who delight to fear thy name, and who prosper, I pray thee, thy servant this day, and grant him mercy, in the sight of this man. Now I was cupbearer to the king. Right, so the idea here, he doesn't really numb out. I thought of that. People could hear this idea of my country being in disarray, a huge problem. I'm in a foreign land, far away from this. I'm in no position to fix this. Could just become numb to the issue. He doesn't do that. He feels the burden of the country he loves and is of, that it's burdened on him. And he prays and he confesses of the sins of his ancestors, and he takes responsibility here. That's what I see. I see the first step to his action, taking responsibility, taking control. It's easy to victimize yourself in a place of such vast problems, but he takes responsibility for it. That's incredible. The second piece I want to see from Nehemiah is his boldness before the king. So after he takes responsibility, he takes action. So he's the cupbearer. He has access to Artaxerxes, the king, on a daily basis. Being the cupbearer, that's something that you need to be at every meal for. So he appears sad before the king, and this could be dangerous. Imagine you're King Artaxerxes, and you see the man who's in charge of not allowing you to be poisoned on a daily basis, right? This is the man who is drinking your cup. And he looks very sad and distraught. Are you okay? Are you depressed? I don't want you to be sad because you're very important to my life. So this could be dangerous for him, but Artaxerxes beckons him. He says, what's wrong? And he speaks anyways. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. And it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 12th year of Artaxerxes the king, when wine was before him, that I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been beforetime sad in his presence. And the king said unto me, why is thy face sad, seeking thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of the heart. Then I was sore afraid. And I said unto the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? And the king said unto me, for what dost thou make request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. So he's saying a prayer while in front of the king. Just a quick little, let this be of your will. Let this please you. And I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servants have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldst send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him, for how long shall thy journey be, and when wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. Moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me to the governors beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come unto Judah. And a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the castle, which appertain to the house, and for the walls of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. The king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me. I like to think of the planning here. He takes responsibility and takes action, and this isn't just some whim that he's saying, I want this. He has a plan in place. Let me get the materials, the raw materials. Let me get documents so that I can get the raw materials. Allow me to pass through these foreign lands. He's planned this out, and he's very wise about this. I believe that that's what makes the king see him as a serious request, is he's saying, I want this allotment of time. I need these things to get this done. Because this is causing me so much sorrow, I have an absolute plan that will get this done. So he also chooses courage here when he's very afraid. He says he's very sore afraid in one of these verses. And he chooses courage nonetheless. And that's important to remember, that there are moments in decisive action where we're going to be stricken with fear, and we need to choose to be courageous instead. Faith doesn't wait for our fear to leave. That's an important idea that I want to remember. When we can think of the times where we were most bold, acting faithfully, it wasn't that we were devoid of fear. It's just that we overcame fear with our faith. It has to be one or the other, and one's not ever going to leave us. The third piece is his secret night inspection. This is sort of his call to action in a way. In chapter 2, he doesn't start with a big speech. He starts with a quiet observation. So when he reaches Jerusalem, he begins assessing once again, gaining information, gaining knowledge to help him get ahead and to make the best decision possible. So verse 11 of chapter 2, I'll read through 18 here. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days, and I arose in the night, I and some few men with me. Neither told I any man what my God put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night by the valley gate, even toward the dragon's well, and to the dung gate. And I viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. When I went on to the fountain gate in the king's pool, there was no place for the beast that was under me to pass. Then went I up in the night by the brook and viewed the wall, and I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the rulers knew not whither I went or what I did, neither what I as yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work. Then said I unto them, Ye see the evil case that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. And I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, Let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hand for the good work. So he rallies these men to his aid. And I believe what does it, he can say God is on my side, but for men to actually come to him, they need to know that something powerful is backing them. And his bold decision to have Artaxerxes support him in the beginning, I believe, is what sways these men. He's saying, okay, they actually have the backing of a true king who is in power of a powerful kingdom at this time. He has the materials from this man. He could get this done, and he seems very driven to do so. So he gains private clarity first. I find it very interesting that he goes in the night, views all these places, and then he says, look at what waste this place is. He gains a full perspective of what's happened. Because, remember now, he's just received a story that has come in. He's just had words. He needs to see it face to face. He sees the vastness of this issue. And once he understands for himself firsthand, he sees his leadership. He says, all right, nothing's being done. I need to step into this role. I think that when responsibility has been abdicated, that's when a leadership role is necessary. If leadership was solid there and things were already moving, I don't believe he would have taken such a prominent role immediately, because he's someone that doesn't know any of these people. He's never met any of these people, so obviously he's not in the most familiar position with these foreigners who are actually his people. But he sees his public leadership either way, and he doesn't stall here. That's what I love about Nehemiah. Once he knows what to do, don't leave time for fear to bridge the gap in between your actions, because then that causes hesitation. This is about concise action, and the best action, once you know what to do, and he prays on things. We know that this is a faithful action, not driven by fear. The best thing to do is just act immediately. What are you waiting for? Nothing. He calls it, come, let us build. So in chapter 4, I want to go down to there next. This is the next place where I see a big piece of opposition encounter Nehemiah. He's building the wall, and he's increasing his strategy, and he's managing everything wonderfully. He's an incredible leader. So his work is opposed at this point in chapter 4, but Nehemiah doesn't stop. That's what I want to see here. Nehemiah does not stop working at the first sign of opposition. I think in my experience, when I try to make a bold step or a bold move forward in my faith, in my life, at the first piece of opposition, I'm like, whoa, I'm trying to do the right thing for God, right? This is for your purpose. Why am I being opposed here? I feel like you should be helping me. This shouldn't be so difficult. There shouldn't be blowback like I'm feeling right now. But Nehemiah doesn't see that way. He just adapts. His adaptation is beautiful right here. In verse 13 of chapter 4, Therefore said I in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in the open places, I set the people after their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and rose up and said unto the nobles and the rulers and the rest of the people, Be ye not afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses. And it came to pass, when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, every one unto his work. And it came to pass from that time forth, that half of my servants wrought in the work, and half of them held spears, the shields and the bows, and the coats of the mail. And the rulers were behind all the house of Judah. Isn't that funny? He's facing these opposition. He's like, all right, half of my workers, you're going to be dedicated to defending us now. He does what is necessary. All right, it might slow our building down, but we're going to make the necessary adjustments to still continue building. I think all these people wanted at this point was just stop building. We don't want to see action taken against us. We want to be in charge here. And Nehemiah says, no, we're not going to stop in the face of opposition. It might slow us down because we're finding other routes to continue our work, but he still continues work nonetheless. I love that. Half of his soldiers held the spears, the shields, and the bows, and the coats of mail. All right, armor up, protect us. Half of you are dedicated to that. Beautiful adjustment there. I love that. They build the wall, and they that bear burdens, laden their burden, wrought in the work with one of their hands, and with the other held a weapon. Isn't that amazing? He doesn't inspire fear whatsoever. Keep working, nonetheless. So the idea here is faith doesn't mean ignoring the danger. You have to be wise enough to recognize the danger and the opposition that come at you and adjust like he does. And it means building and guarding at the same time for him. Defend yourself while you're doing your work. I love that. Point 5 is he rejected the distraction here. And this is in chapter 6. I see this point brought home. So what's happening here is his enemies try again to pull him away from the work with some sort of meeting. But anything that is not directly correlated to his continuance of his work for God, what he is called to do, he has to put the horse blinders on. This is where I'm going. And as soon as you let things pull you this way or that way, even if they seem semi-important, if they are not dedicated to your purpose 100%, we have to be wary of anything that pulls us off of the primary trajectory where we are aiming for. And this is what happens. He doesn't allow anything to pull him away. Nehemiah is incredibly focused, and his focus defines him here. So verse 1 of chapter 6 of Nehemiah. Now it came to pass when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall, and that there was no breach left therein, though even unto that time I had not set up the doors in the gates. That Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, Come, let us meet together in one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me mischief, and I sent messengers unto them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease whilst I leave and come down to you? And they sent unto me 4 times after this sort, and I answered them after the same manner. So he senses this is not completely honest what these men's intentions are. And he says to them the truth. He says nothing that would incriminate him here. He says exactly what he is doing. I'm leading this, and if I leave, it's not going to be done. He knows that he is the catalyst here for the work and the pace at which they are moving forward. I'm not leaving. I sense something a little odd is going on here. They might want to do him mischief, so no, I'm not leaving. I'm going to continue my work. And that's beautiful. I love that. That's his persistence of will coming out there, and nothing gets in the way. He has those horse blinders on. He's moving straight forward. Anything that might sound a little odd to him, no, it doesn't matter. It's not part of my work for God, so it doesn't matter. That's the bottom line. I love that. He's right down to the bottom line. So he doesn't confuse politeness with obedience here, and he knows his work, and he stays on it. The last point from Nehemiah is the completion of the wall. Chapter 6 of Nehemiah Just a couple verses here. Verses 15 and 16. So the wall was finished in the 25th day of the month Elul, and the 50 and 2 days. That's the most incredible part to me. You can say someone's working quickly or accomplishing a task at a fast pace. He builds the walls of Jerusalem back to their former state in 52 days. That has to be some sort of incredible leadership. And we don't see the whole of it. But we see through Nehemiah's telling some brief points of what creates this leadership. These are the foundations, the focus and the drive and the observation and the leadership and the adjustments. Half my men are going to guard while defending the other half. And it's beautiful. His leadership is incredible, and it shows. 52 days when others couldn't do it in years. And so it came to pass, verse 16, so it came to pass when all our enemies heard thereof, that all the nations that were about us feared, and they perceived that this work was wrought of our God. That's how incredible the task seemed, that the foreigners were like, this is a godly work that you're doing. How did you possibly manage this in this sort of time? It was so unexpected to these people there. Yeah, something's going on here, supernatural. That's what they're thinking. So the idea here is that faith that acts actually finishes things, and he sees it through to the very end. God gets the credit because the work is plainly beyond them. Nehemiah could not have done this if it wasn't the will of God. I believe that completely. God convicted him in the beginning when he heard that his home country was in disrepair. It was God that pierced his conscience, and he knew at that point, I'm the person for this job. So he understood his purpose, and it was according to God's will, and that is why the credit is to God, all to God. And Nehemiah is very selfless in this way, and he claims the same things. So that's all from Nehemiah. That's what I wanted to recognize. That's the main point. This is the primary example of how do we get action done? How do we actually accomplish things? Because a wise man once told me that when there is an excess of words, there's an absence of works. I think that's very true. We can sit and talk about all these ideas, all these characteristics that we want to bring out into the world, and I hear it talked about all the time. I believe it's a good thing to have our minds set on, that we want to bring certain characteristics to the world, that we want to bring the fruits of the Spirit to the world. But here we see something concrete, and we see something that is good for the country of Jerusalem, the kingdom, and something is actually accomplished. And you don't see that very often. A work seen through by a courageous, God-fearing leader, that someone that promises something actually does it. I'm sure we can think of the exact opposite when we think of modern-day politicians. Something is promised, a few years later you're like, wait, didn't you promise us something at the beginning? It was just to propel them to power. But Nehemiah is convicted from the very beginning to accomplish a task, and that is what brings him to power. So that is faith expressed through action. And I want to contrast that because I wanted to play devil's advocate for a moment and say that, well, isn't it a good thing sometimes not to act and to observe in cases and trust God and be patient? Patience is, after all, something that we should all have. And I think of the story of Abraham in Genesis 16 and his misguided action. And the brief backstory behind this is because we don't need to read much of this. Just a few verses that define the story. But God promises Abram a son at this point, and years had passed, and he had no child. And he was past the childbearing years that anyone would conceive of childbearing. So to a normal mind, I'm sure to the people around him, they're thinking, are you sure you want to keep waiting? The odds are already very stacked against you. Something miraculous is already going to have to happen. And so years passed with no child after God had promised him a child. And Sarah, his wife, grew impatient and decided to help God by giving him her servant Hagar. And Abraham went into her and bore a child with her. and Hagar conceived Ishmael. And this caused all sorts of jealousy and bitterness and tragedy. He had to end up sending this servant and her child away. And it actually affected their future. Believe it or not, their many descendants became enemies of the Israelites after this. But the lesson here, I believe, this is an act out of fear and not an act from faith. So I made this little drawing last night to think of this little illustration. And it's a bubble, and you're in pain. You're in a bad situation. You're right in the middle of it. And what are you thinking when you act out of fear? You're thinking, let me get out of this bubble of badness, of pain. So your aim is in nowhere in particular. You're just thinking, let me get out of this situation. And on the other side of the illustration, I drew you and a good situation, something that you know is good and you want. Then you have to narrow your aim, because if you just start thinking, I want to go somewhere, you might go nowhere near that good situation, that betterment of your life. And so it's an issue of aim. That's what I realized, is that acting out of fear and acting out of faith, the difference is your aim. Are you aiming to get out of this bad situation, or are you aiming to go towards something good? I think that's why we must narrow our aim upon that which we know is good in God. So I'm going to read 6 verses in Genesis 16 describing Abram's situation, and it'll show the detail of tragedy that his action out of fear brought. So let's recognize that as we read. Verse 1 of Genesis 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaiden, and an Egyptian whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said unto Abram, Behold now, Jehovah hath restrained me from bearing. Go in, I pray thee, unto my handmaiden. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. And Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her handmaiden, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abram, her husband, to be his wife. And he went unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. What did she think was going to happen? She thought she could be this perfect paragon of, I will be selfless here. But he's committing adultery against her. How could you not feel the jealousy in it? This is clearly an act that if Nehemiah were in this situation, I believe if Abram was desiring, why has God's promise not been fulfilled? What should I do next? Nehemiah, I believe in this situation, would have prayed and fasted over the issue before acting. That's what I see Nehemiah doing. Abram doesn't do any of these things. I do not believe that if Abram had prayed to God of this issue before he acted, that he would have acted so rashly. And I believe the same with Sarah here. And at verse 5, Sarah said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I gave my handmaiden into thy bosom, and when she saw that she conceived, I was despised in her eyes. Jehovah judged between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarah, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her that which is good in thine eyes. So one bad decision is compounded by another. It's hard to stop the ball once you start rolling it. Do whatever you see as fit now. You've made an issue of this, so don't go to God in any of it, I suppose, is what he's saying. Just do whatever you think is good next. You make one bad decision, forget it. Just keep going down the path until you can fix it. This is a bad trajectory. I see this as something that's only going to cause pain, and it does. Thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her that which is good in thine eyes. And Sarah dealt hardly with her, and she fled from her face. So pain caused by action from fear. I think of it going from or going to. If you're going from somewhere, you may want to question whether you're acting out of fear or out of faith. If you're going to somewhere, ensure that it is out of faith. Ensure that that aim is a godly direction. How much longer do we have? When do we go till? You know? Okay. All right, so this will be the last brief story that I cover, and it will be... I know it'll be. I had a few more, but this is the perfect one. Caleb in Joshua chapter 14. A brief backstory of Caleb, just because I'm jumping around all these stories. I don't want to make you try to memorize what's happening where. I'm just going to give you a backstory. When Moses first sent 12 spies into the land of Canaan, 10 came back full of fear, but Joshua and Caleb were the 2 spies that Moses sent that returned with faith, insisting that God's promise was good and that he could give them the land. The people believed the fearful report, and God sentenced that generation to wander until they died. So they listened to the fearful and not the faithful. God said, okay, you're not going to receive my promises. You who are full of fear and have no faith, you will not receive the promised land. So they wandered until that generation died in the wilderness, and only Joshua and Caleb would live to enter that land. The faithful still received the promise. So this is about 40 some odd years later. Caleb is 85 in this story. He has waited decades, and they are continuing to conquer the land. And what Caleb does at this point is he remembers the faithful promise which God made to Moses, and he knows that God will deliver the land to him. So he makes an incredible decision, an incredibly bold decision, I'll say, and he doesn't ask for any easy land to conquer. He says, give me this hill country, which is full of giants, full of these fortified cities, difficult, the most difficult to take. And, well, we'll see what happens. The action here is that faith doesn't retire into comfort. It grows bolder because his faith grows with time. I think it's easy for many of us to say, maybe not me, but some of us older here in the crowd, it may be easier to say the action is a young man's thing, that once we begin to age and our children take the place of us, that it's a young man's thing to do bold actions, to take action and to do things. But I don't see that here with Caleb at all. 85 years old, let's remember that. So the point here is that faith takes the hard thing when fear takes the easy thing. And Caleb remembers his promise. This is actually in, the first piece here is in Numbers, chapter 13, verses 27 through 33. You don't need to turn there, I'll read it for you. Verses 27, and they told him and said, we came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Howbeit the people that dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very great. And moreover we saw the children of the Anak here. Amalek dwelleth in the land of the south, and the Hittite and the Jebusite and the Amorite dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanite dwelleth by the sea and along the side of the Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land, which they had spied out unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw are men of great stature. It's like they didn't learn from the generation directly before them. What happened to the spies who were fearful? All right, fine. You don't get the promises of God because you don't believe in the promises of God. Verse 33, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come out of the Nephilim and were in our sight as grasshoppers, and so were in their sight. And Joshua, this is a chapter later, I'm jumping around a bit just to kind of finish this up. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh were of them that spied out the land, rent their clothes, and they spoke unto the congregation of Israel, the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to spy out is exceeding good land. If Jehovah delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it unto us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. So I apologize. I was just reading out of Numbers. This is the original story. I was thinking this was the second one because they are so similar. So to skip down, Joshua, the next book, the next generation, chapter 14, when the children of Judah drew nigh unto Joshua and Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Kenizzite said unto him, thou knowest the thing that Jehovah spake unto Moses the man of God concerning me and concerning thee in Kadesh Barnea. 40 years old was I when Moses, the servant of Jehovah, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren that went up with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed Jehovah my God. That's faith. And Moses sware on that day, saying, surely the land whereon my foot hath trodden shall be thy inheritance to thee. Now therefore, verse 12, give me this hill country whereof Jehovah spake in that day, for thou heardest in that day how the Anakim were there, and the cities great and fortified. And it may be that Jehovah will be with me, and I shall drive them out as Jehovah spake. And Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron unto Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, unto this day, because that he wholly followed Jehovah, the God of Israel. That last phrase, because he wholly followed Jehovah. And to pull it together, end this up, faith that acts looks like prayer, courage, planning, movement, organization, finishing the job. We don't see that very often, but seeing a job through. It's often that you get 90% of the way through progressing on something and you say, all right, I can let off the gas pedal now. But in whatever act we desire to accomplish, however bold or however minuscule, let's see it through to the end. Let us be like Nehemiah and not be distracted until the very last brick is laid, until the wall is finished. Otherwise, it may not be finished. So faith is motion. This is the main point I want to drive home. Faith is motion. It is disciplined, courageous, God-centered motion. And that's all I have. A question for us to go away with, a thought, is where might we be delaying under action, and where might we be using spiritual guise or language to cover that up? That we're just waiting on God. How can we take action? That's all I have. Thank you.